Hello, this is Nimesha, Assistant Professor of English, Fatima College, Madurai. In this video, we are going to see about enclosures, which is a feudal appropriation. Enclosures were a process in England that involved fencing off land for private use. Before the enclosure movement, land was communally owned. The enclosure movement began in the 12th century and progressed rapidly from the 1450 to 1640. During the 14th and early 15th centuries, manorial system had changed. Demesne lands were leased to renting farmers. Manor codes were not active and regular. Changes were gradual and it affected other parts of the manorial life that became more steady and extensive. These changes are grouped under the name enclosures. Enclosure of land was closely connected with the increase of sheep raising. Steady demand for good prices of wool, both for export and within England. The sheep raising needed fewer workers, so high wages were less of a problem. It allowed for investment of capital and freedom from local customs. Instead of being part of regular farming, many started raising sheep mainly for wool. Manor lords, freeholders, farming tenants, and customary tenants all got involved. Some individuals owned large numbers of sheep ranging from 5,000 to 24,000. This practice became widespread and was often mentioned in laws and literature of the time. Sheep could not be raised extensively on land divided by the old open field system. In open fields called vill, sheep had to either share common pasture with others or be kept in small groups within the sheep raiser's various small strips of land. This limited the number of sheep that could be kept. To raise more sheep, sheep raisers needed to consolidate enough land strips to justify building a hedge or fence around them. Alternatively, they could separate part or all of the open pastures or meadows in the same way called enclosing. Enclosing led to the creation of separate enclosed fields, which became common during this time and are now almost universal in modern farming in English speaking countries. Obtaining adjacent area acres or enough common pasture for enclosing usually required displacing other tenants. Enclosing often resulted in evictions. Lots of manors or some tenants enclosed both their own land and the land of others. This led to the eviction of previous landholders to facilitate enclosing. In 1468, Chief Justice Bryan stated that tenants by custom had inheritance rights similar to freeholders. In 1484, another Chief Justice ruled that customary tenants who paid their dues could not be evicted by the lord of the manor. These tenants were called copyholders because their tenure proof was recorded in manor court rolls from which copies were taken as titles. Copyhold tenure became widely recognized and provided nearly as secure a title as freehold. Despite these legal recognitions, the laws might not have been well defined or understood, offering limited practical protection against eviction. Many small farms were not continuously held by long-term tenants, but often reverted to lords who then re-rented them. These new tenants were frequently evicted to make way for enclosed sheep farms. Enclosures and evictions often led to the entire open lands of villages being enclosed. Traditional agriculture ended and non-resident enclosures caused the farming population to disappear. Sheep raising required fewer laborers, forcing farm laborers to leave and seek work elsewhere. Villages were deserted, houses fell into ruin, and townships lost their populations. This phenomenon was known as the decaying of towns, with enclosures denounced as enemies of the country. Most enclosures and depopulations were only partial. The movement was driven by multiple factors, including investment of available capital in enclosed farms. The dissolution of monasteries transferred their lands from eager to maximize individuals eager to maximize profits through enclosures between 1536 to 1542. Now let us look into the disapproval that arose due to enclosures. Sir Thomas More condemned them in Utopia, and other writers of the period, including those from Elizabeth's reign, shared his disapproval. Preachers like Latimer, Lever, and Bacon criticized landlords, enclosures, and city merchants who acquired country lands. Many pamphlets and sermons opposed the enclosures. The government opposed enclosures due to the concerns about population reduction, potential lack of soldiers, insufficient grain production, and increasing number of beggars. Discontent in the country arose from high rents, unemployment, and general aversion to change. There were a series of laws through Parliament aimed to curb the rise of sheep farming and its consequences. In 1488, there was a statute prohibiting conversion of tillage land to pasture. In 1514, there was a law reinforcing the 1488 statute requiring repairs and reoccupation of decayed houses. In 1517, there was a government commission to investigate enclosures. In 1518, there was a proclamation by Lord Chancellor Wolsey to open enclosed lands to prove their public benefit. In 1534, there were laws limiting sheep ownership to 2,400 per person. In 1548, there was a new commission on enclosures recommended further legislation. In 1552, law for stricter enforcement of anti-enclosure measures were taken. In 1554 and 1562, there was a reenactment of old laws. In 1593, there was a reappeal of the 1562 law. And in 1598, there's a new anti-enclosure law and extension. In 1624, there was a reappeal of all enclosure laws. These laws were largely ineffective due to the nobility and gentry favoring enclosures as they increased rents. These classes were responsible for enforcing legislation. Besides government opposition, people occasionally rioted and destroyed hedges and other enclosures. There were three major insurrections linked to opposition against enclosures. In 1536, there was a pilgrimage of grace rising to people partly against the Reformation and enclosures. In 1549, there was a series of risings, notably Camp Kidd's rebellion in Norfolk. In 1552, insurrection in Buckinghamshire. These uprisings were harshly suppressed by the government. Despite opposition from laws, public opinion, and violent mobs and rural changes continued. Enclosures were likely made in about half the manors of England during this period. Enclosures peaked in the early 16th century, became less frequent in the latter half, and had largely run their course by the century's end. So that's about enclosures. Hope you got good insights on the enclosure system of England. Thank you for watching.